The interior, in my opinion, is a very important aesthetic component of cars along with the exterior. At the end of the day, contemplating the courtyard panels or the interior elements, we are certainly no less than shooting. Therefore, I want to touch on this topic in this issue. Let's take a look at some serious and not so big salons from the Space 80s era. Not only from this time. What you see in front of you now is by no means a prop from some fantastic pastor's block of past years. Here is the interior decoration of the concept overseer Boomerang Model 1970. It is curious that the car was later heart-infected for public roads. After some time it was sold to an unknown collector. The appearance of Budanov Mazin is, of course, catchy, but the main feature is the salon. Almost all instruments were inscribed in the steering wheel. The improvised tidy includes a huge, find a bunch of switch gauges and switches, including turns, Abdulov and so on. On the central tunnel other fuels are located, and the ignition lock fills this whole picture with extravagance and leather chairs of an unusual shape. Now let's look at an already production car from the 80s, whose interiors look even in 2017. Very interesting. To begin with, the one that appeared in the 74th year from March of the year is one of some prototypes in those cars that sociologists now call the four loyal brands. Daring machine is, of course, controversial, but when will you still find the availability of buying 4 black sedan with opening headlights? Voiced by Yandex Speech Kit. It is curious that the car was assembled entirely by hand, and many of the main elements were made of aluminum. Only one super sedan left the factory per week. And of course, the interior of the carriage looks for the mid-70s just megaphone partially. Let's start with the fact that even then the model had a digital court panel. Data of speed, temperature, coolant, oil and so on were carried out electronically. But the most shocking fact, at least for me, are probably all the control panels that were under the hill. With their help it was possible to manage many things, for example, activate parties against the Ottoman, set up an electronic clock, and much more. Add to this also high-quality wood leather trim, electronically adjustable seats and an 8 motor capable of accelerating the car to 97 km per hour instead of about 7 seconds and accelerating 2 km per hour. Of course, this is very impressive, but it is worth mentioning that all this electronics still malfunctioned from time to time, and a little later a wagon appeared packed just to the point that you also have a satellite, a new bomb phone, an audio system, several TZ and a sports car. In total, 645 cars of various versions and series were produced. In general, in this meeting, everyone did not think of the development to build a car, only just a game console of the time. Here is another production car, this time from the Great and Terrible Lunch. However, there is absolutely nothing unusual in his appearance. But as far as the jury is, one ex-prime minister is just as curious about the interior of the cabin, while such a front panel could boast. And the lot which Picasso himself supposedly drew, the try is traced in it, and the center console simply stuck all sorts of indicators with the device already absolutely nothing superfluous, laconic and most importantly, tasteful. Well, what about the cosmic interior of a spontaneous family bathing bar, and the bones from the 80s are still occupied by the past? It is not in vain that the shape of the steering wheel and the block consisting of devices and the center console are in harmony. All these myriads of buttons deserve special mention. And she twisted, and of course, an authoritative electronic device on the panel with a certain law side. And how beautifully the coolant and fuel level indicators are drawn. There are even graphic images of the school, pressure on another. To be honest, there is some kind of magic in the salons of the time. I don't want to sit and look at every detail of the kitchen. However, even films, music and fashion of the time have just a unique sphere. Let me remind you that Coster also had an equally optimistic appearance and an 8/10-liter engine with a Troubadour with a capacity of 111 horsepower. You, of course, think that this is not enough. However, such a motor allowed a light box with an automatic machine to overcome the bar of 100 km per hour in just 9.5 tenths of a second. It is interesting that a rather angular car, and I am just a fan of such forms, had a quite good by today's standards coefficient of special resistance of 0 as much as 2900, and even had a system for changing the crisis. In addition to natural completeness, there also existed anterior natural modification. Let's go. And here we see the true speakers and tourists in all its glory, embodied at the end of the year against the backdrop of the boom of the very famous bands. They just took the car and stuffed the insides, including a full commuter highway mission from the legendary Russian 205/16, and wrapped it all up in a beautiful package. Supercar at first glance, a modest engine of 1/8 of a liter was inflated right up to horsepower at the expense of two superchargers. Inside the block it lived up to its name 100%. The bright salon resembled such a helicopter cockpit from science fiction films, door cards, seats, which, by the way, could boast of terms, explanations, a fresh steering wheel and other elements were upholstered in evocative red leather. A class company he developed for the concept of a Baroque audio system, a giant liquid crystal quart panel in the size you can see for yourself, and even on an operating system with a screen. It is not known, however, exactly on what principles she worked in the 84th introduction into the free operation of the system. It seems that the concept really anticipated our time, because right now on modern cars almost most of the space on the front panel is occupied by screens. But in the interview of the Bazaar there is still something fascinating and elusive, which is definitely not the case with new cars. Well, if you were captured by this issue, please like it.